Hi, this is Regina Y. Favors with Toxic Encounters book. So I have another topic I would like to discuss, and that is mate preferences. And you can find this in chapter 5 of the book, which is titled Toxic Encounters, Why People Pursue Rebound Relationships, Part 1. And it is part 1 of a 3-part series. So the thing about mate preferences, if you've noticed that a lot of people have been discussing their mate preferences, and they sort of use race as a major factor in terms of what type of mate preference they are interested in. So you may have a certain race say, I only date this race, or a certain woman says, I only date only a certain race of man. But mate preferences isn't always just about race, even though we might have made it about race. And um, the psychology research actually has 22 mate preference factors. Now, I'm going to discuss 5. I'll pull the 5 that I think are the most important, so that we get off the conversation train about race. Because quiet as it kept, you can really date anyone you want. You don't have to say as a one person that I only date white people, or I only date black people, or I only date Asian people. You really don't have to say that today, because everyone has access to multiple racial, ethnic, cultural backgrounds of people. And that discussion really is limited, because at the end of the day, the most important preference is choosing a person who can be 100% responsible adult, and that you don't have to take care of somebody who cannot be 100% adult. They Meaning that they don't even get the basics down as being an adult, right? So mate preferences, you can find this in chapter 5. There are 5 mate preference factors out of 22. If you could design your mate, which of the following 5 mate preference factors would you consider? And so that's status, physical attractiveness, friendliness, health, family orientation. And the one thing I want to call attention to, because I specifically did not place race on this list, and I would have to go back and review the 22 total factors, um, just to see what the percentage is in terms of how people choose. But the most important aspect of considering these 5 mate preference factors is that whatever it is you want in another person, make sure you reflect that yourself. So, for example, if we're looking at status, people tend to marry up when they want to increase their status. So that means that if they are at a lower economic status, they will try to marry someone at a higher economic status with the financial resources and access to other types of networks and resources. Well, when you think about it, there is a point in life where a hand from the top might need to bring you up, extend a hand to you, right? And that way that you can sort of gain access. But you can't always rely on someone with status to bring you up. At some point, you're going to have to just do the work, and whatever that work is, in order for you to gain a higher status. So again, some people will marry up. Some people will marry someone who is a celebrity, someone with higher financial status, someone who has connections. And all that really amounts to is you skipping. Really, that's what it really amounts to. It's just mere skipping. I don't want to do the hard work that will require me to gain the higher status. I would rather just find someone, befriend that person, possibly marry that person, and then I will gain the status that I want. The problem with that, though, however, is that you never quite feel um, comfortable in that status because you never did the work in order for you to fully feel that status, right? The person, now I'm not saying that the person that you married actually did the work either. I don't know, but usually they have done the work in some ways, or sometimes what they have as status is inherited. You know, their parents did all of the work, right? They walk in comfort and convenience and confidence because they grew up in it. So even if they didn't necessarily do all the work to get to where they are, and they basically inherited the status from their parents, they have had so much exposure to it from the time they were a child, and they heard their father, you know, discussing business and finances, and their mother planning parties and entertaining high profile guests, and that has been like a ladder of learning. So from whatever age they could really understand what was going on, all the way up until 18, and then all the way up until when you marry them. So they've had so much exposure to it that it really does seem like it's just a second skin, right? You know, second nature. You skipping ahead and trying to become their status by not doing any work, by not growing up in that kind of understanding, ladder step by step, by not even maybe going to their schools, you know, to their Ivy League institutions or something like that. By you not doing that, once you get to that status, you're not going to feel the same kind of confidence and comfort. Um, it's like what people say, you can take someone out of a certain like hood or trailer park, but you can't take the hood or trailer park out of them because you're not used to that. So that's why it's important that whatever you are asking of someone else, that you sort of reflect that. You know, you may not have their hundreds of millions, but the fact that you worked hard and you may have $5 million in the bank still says a lot about your ethic, your work ethic, your character, the fact that you think working hard is important, and that you can manage your finances, because keeping $5 million is important. It's very important. We don't need to always look at the fact that someone has 100 million. We need to look at the fact that we are very good at managing the 5 million, because if you can't manage the five, you're going to have problems with the 100. And that is another status situation. If you come from a poverty background, economically distressed background, you barely had enough to eat, you couldn't shop or anything like that. Once you get to that level, you're going to want to really do everything that you can to sort of close those emotional, financial gaps in your heart. When at that level, you really don't need to spend as much. How many poor people do we see in name brands, and how many rich people do we see in everyday clothes, to the point that we think they are homeless, right? So status is a very important concept. Physical attractiveness, I think, is really overrated, and that may be because because I don't feel like I fit the global beauty standard, and the global beauty standard is really white, blonde, blue eyes, right? And then after that, just white skin, period. And then all others tend to fall up under that particular those two categories, right? All the way to the end of dark. Well, physical attractiveness also can be relative when you think about status. So you may have someone who is average but comes from a royal background, and someone who is American and fits the global beauty standard. The person who is royal, regardless of how that person looks, would gain more attention, strangely enough. Sure, someone may lust after someone who is blonde, blue-eyed, and white or whatever. They may lust after that person, but status oftentimes trumps physical attractiveness. So here it is, you're doing your best to try to look a certain part, you're lightening your skin, you changing your hair color, you're going to the gym, and we're going to talk about that, going to the gym like crazy to look as skinny as you can, to look as fit as you can. But you could be easily thrown over for someone who fits a higher status, and that person doesn't necessarily have to be royal. That person can be just from a name, and an American name brand, or the person could be a celebrity and the person is not as globally beauty, does not fit the global beauty standard. But the fact that that person has status and has access to people and has access to more money at a higher level, that physical attractiveness goes down, is sort of goes down the ladder, it goes down the level. Now, what people do oftentimes, they might get with you if you don't fit a certain beauty standard, get with you, marry you, stay with you for a number of years, divorce, take a percentage or half, and then go and marry the person that they really want. The problem with that, though, is you do that to one person, that person that you decide to leave your wife for will actually do it to you, because then she could repeat your pattern. She could be with you with the money that you got half from your ex-wife, be with you, love you. You probably do all you can to try to increase that money, and then she turns around and divorces you, take half, and gets even a better person. So physical attractiveness, we put a lot of weight on it, and we don't really call people ugly anymore, and I never liked that word. But we do like to use the word average or below average, those two words. But, people often say too, people like to say that rich people like to marry pretty people, but that's not always really the case, because you get a lot of rich guys who don't marry the blonde, blue-eyed person. They marry the one who looks just kind of average, just like a normal person. So physical attractiveness has its merit. There's nothing wrong with looking good, and there's nothing wrong in some ways with having a sort of level of beauty, right? But you can't base everything off physical attractiveness, because you need to be attracted to that person emotionally as well, spiritually. And dare I say, you need to be attracted financially to someone. Friendliness is very important. I think that's probably more important than all, except for health. Friendliness, because that's the worst thing that you would want to do, is marry someone who is rude and mean and unkind, and if you got sick, you couldn't depend upon them, and and they're you don't want to be clingy, right? And you don't want the person to be clingy, but you do want a certain friendliness. You don't want somebody just to only use you for certain aspects of who you are as an individual, and not take into consideration you as a person, right? So friendliness does make a big difference, because at the end of the day, you have to converse. You have to have a conversation with your partner. You can't be a person where both of you go to the opposite ends of the house and you never engage each other. And the only time you do engage each other, if you passing each other up in the kitchen, or you engage in sex for how many times a week. Maybe times that you take a trip where you go and have to go somewhere and you say goodbye to each other, and then the special events where you go as a couple. But people say all the time that it is important that you marry your friend, that it's not just that you get into relationships so hastily that all you want is the sex, or all you want is the money, all you want is the status. That friendliness is such a important characteristic of not only the individual, but the relationship. That you as a couple are friendly people. People observe you as people who shake hands, hug, entertain, love. show up at the hospital when someone's sick, maybe help that person get well. So that's a friendliness is very important when you're choosing a mate, because you have to go out in the public. It's not like you're going to live on an island where you don't have to talk to anyone, right? But even if you didn't have to talk to anyone, and there were animals on the island, wouldn't you want to be kind of friendly with them? Not necessarily the wild animals, but some animals, right? You wouldn't want to be mean to them. And that's another thing. You want to be careful about marrying a mean person. We all get upset when we are confronted. We all get upset when things don't go our way. We all get upset when we need you and you are not there for us for a certain time. Not every time, but for a certain time that we truly need you. We all have issues where we don't process emotionally well, and sometimes we have the worst temperament, and sometimes we can act like toddlers, still struggling to manage our emotions. But at the end of the day, at your core, are you a friendly person? So when you are choosing a mate, that's something that you want to think about. You don't want to think about the fact that you both are putting on a show. You want to think about, what will life be like with this person? Don't just look at the chivalry. Don't just look at the fact that the person is a lady or a gentleman. Look at how the person treats other people. I've always heard people say, if you want to know how someone, how a leader, the true character of a leader, look at how he treats someone behind closed doors, right? And that should be the same about you. How do you treat people behind closed doors? I know a person in public. She got the biggest, beautiful, widest smile. She jokes, she laughs. People love her. They want to be friends with her, everything. But when we were behind closed doors, she was the most hostile, quiet, gave me the silent treatment. I'm not going to tell you who the person is. Gave me the silent treatment. Provoked. Provoked me to anger. Lied on me, pitted me against other people and other people against me. But if you saw her in public, she would seem like the most friendly person you have ever met. She calls herself a giver, and she gives. She calls herself different types of things. But I saw the real person, and maybe because it was me that she had a problem with. But then one time before, I observed her sort of interaction with someone else that wasn't necessarily me in terms of my spirit, but just me, just in terms of she was making a comparison in her mind that this person over here deserves better attention than another person deserves better attention. And I could see it. And she was very good at putting on a show because she didn't fully show who she was. And so it's interesting how people treat you. So friendliness is a huge factor. Health is a huge factor. Sometimes you're not going to know what the health issues of that person until you really marry them. And I'm not saying that the marriage is going to create a health issue, but people don't always tell you the truth about their health issues. That's the point I'm really making. That they oftentimes cover up some things. Like some of these people who are going around sleeping with everybody, they are now bragging about having HIV. They're now bragging about having herpes and that they gave it to people and things like that. And that's something that you want to consider, because with this day and age, with people getting all different types of diseases and engaging in all different types of sexual acts, health should be a conversation starter, period. And if you want to get married, we need to see health documents. And if that person says no, okay, well, we're going to be married, aren't I going to be have access to your health records, especially if I have to make health decisions. And that goes to just being informed about each partner, that partner being informed about you, you being informed about that partner, what's going on, and what you need to take into consideration. You could still marry the person, but at least you know how to plan the finance aspects of the relationship. So if there's a health issue, who's going to carry the most insurance, health insurance? Do we need to get whole life insurance or term life insurance or anything like that? And so do we need to create a health care directive? If you are out of consciousness or whatever, is there a do not resuscitate on file? Or do you want us to resuscitate on file, right? Healthcare directive, insurance, something in a will that says something about your health. These are conversation starters that we don't have because we are too busy jumping into bed with each other. And that's a real shame that we can't control ourselves for the most important aspects of bringing and bridging our lives together, that we don't sit down to talk about money, we don't sit down to talk about job, we don't sit down to talk about will, trust, insurance, finances, everything. We don't sit down and talk about that. We just immediately jump into bed together. And so if you are that kind of person who jumps into bed with somebody before you talk about the important things, you're going to be attracted to that very same person who thinks the same way. And the thing is that you run the risk and the consequence of never getting that kind of stuff done. And then there is an emergency situation and you don't know what to do because you haven't saved for it. There's no emergency savings plan. One of you loses your job. And so then the health care is lost. So these are sort of the health issues that you want to consider. And then lastly, family orientation. There's no such, it's really not, you should not force anyone to have a family. It doesn't make any sense to say, okay, well, he doesn't want to have a child, but I do. And I'm just going to go ahead and have this child and get him to change his mind. That's wrong. And it's deceptive. Very deceitful. If the person does not want to have a child, then don't marry that person. Wait, grieve, journal, get over that situation, and put yourself back out there again. Because all you're going to do is end up provoking in that person a sense of anger and wrath. And so even if the person comes to love the child, he or she comes to love the child, and they may not resent the child, but they may resent you. And if there's a breakdown in your relationship and you end up divorcing, in some ways, subconsciously, he's going to take vengeance and try to take the child as a way of punishing you for making him love the child. I know that's strange to say it like that. So family orientation, those are things you got to talk about. That's not something that is up for debate, or you have sex and then all of a sudden you find yourself pregnant. Pregnancy should be an intentional thing. It should not be something that we call a mistake. It should not be something that we call a mishap, a boo-boo, or whatever. We are not children. We understand that when we come together sexually, that one person has the seed and one person has the soil, and all the seed has to do is hit the egg, and then a baby is formed. So family orientation, taking the time to understand. Another thing you want to do is sort of look at how your partner interacts with their family. So if the partner makes the mother, who will become your mother-in-law, a priority over you, you need to know that early. Now, some things you may not be able to sort of get over and let go of or whatever. You just, in some ways, when mom comes to the house, you might need to let her have the kitchen, because she doesn't have the kitchen like every day. She's not at the house every day, unless she's living with you. Now, if she's living with you, that's completely different. But sometimes you just may need to share in the load, so you keep peace. I am a firm believer that when I get married, that I'm the queen of my house. I'm not going to play second fiddle to any woman. However, I do understand there are special occasions that I may have to take a back seat, especially holiday situations, sometimes entertaining situations, like if there's a cookout or something. And I may have to take some time to just kind of guard my tongue, preserve my peace, endure the situation, be happy, engage, be a family, and then thank God they are leaving, right? And so you need to know that. Also, family orientation, you want to ask the most important questions regarding whether they already have kids, and what are the relationships with your partner and their kids. Or if you already have kids, what is the relationship between you and your kids? Because kids often feel like once you get married, you sort of ignore them. And it's very important that you push the narrative that we are family. That's why I don't like the term step kids and stepdaughters and step families. I just don't like that. Blended family is just fine, but I don't mind being called a bonus mom or something like that. But for the most part, we are family, and everyone needs to feel like they are included and not feel like they are outsiders and excluded. So that's a very important thing to consider. Family orientation, understanding that we are family, talking about aspects of the family in terms of priorities, talking about roles. When one thing I notice about step families, and I'm just saying that for right now, that whenever the woman and her kids move into the house of her husband and his kids, there's always this feeling of this is mine and you guys can have that over there. Well, in reality, the whole house is everybody's. The house mainly belongs to the parents, of course, but the whole house is really everybody's. And I don't like this sort of separatism and this pitting against each other. The mother is mother to everybody now. The father is father to everybody. And if you are not ready to take on the role of extra kids, then you definitely should not marry a person who has kids. So family orientation is a very important thing. So keep these in mind. The 5 out of 22, you can always research using a keyword search, mate preference factors, to find out the rest of them. So status, physical attractiveness, friendliness, health, and family orientation. All right, so this is available on Amazon, Toxic Encounters, Why People Pursue Rebound Relationships, Part 1. You can visit my website for tips, ReginaYFavors.com. Like, subscribe, and follow. I am on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. Just type in Regina Y. Favors. Thank you very much for listening.